This is the moment we've all been waiting for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world. Let's get ready to
Welcome to the Junkyard Pod, hosted by Tony Pesta and Jackson Flickinger. The Cleveland Cavaliers took care of business in Game 1 behind a 97-83 victory over the Orlando Magic. We have a lot to discuss from this game, but let's start here. Jackson, how are you feeling after this one?
I am feeling about as optimistic about the Cavs as I think I have all season. Just by the way they won in the ways that they lost against the Magic last year. Sorry, against the Knicks last year. I don't think you can see this performance where Jarrett Allen has 18 rebounds after having 3 games last season against the Knicks where he only had 5 or less. So just seeing the growth from him, and I feel like you saw the growth from Donovan as well, and really everybody.
Really across the board, yeah.
Right. So I think that's where you can't help but get excited because you know that this team is better than an 8 for 30 from 3-point team. You know that because I think they generated some pretty good looks today that didn't fall after the first 5.
They missed 18 in a row at one point.
Right. Yeah.
And they were still up by 15 points. So it's like that's the type of variance that usually if you miss 18 in a row, like you're out of the game. The Cavs are in the driver's seat, which I think says a lot.
Yeah, and I think like those misses, like Niang 0 for 4, you have Strus 1 for 5, Garland 2 for 6. Like those are guys that you expect to probably make some more. Sam missed his only 3. Karis LeVert went 0 for 1. That's, you're gonna get that.
George Niang had the best 1 for 7 game of his career, dare I say.
Yeah, and I think that's just because how the offense looked really bogged down with those Mobley Allen minutes, especially after the first initial wave where Mobley
in the
came
second
out
half,
hit.
definitely.
Yeah, because
first half they looked fine, but it's the first half Mobley that you were mentioning in the Fear the Sword group chat.
It's the first quarter Mobley. You can't overreact the first quarter Mobley. First quarter Mobley is maybe he's like first quarter Kevin Love. I remember like when when the Kyrie and LeBron Cavs, it would be like, all right, we're gonna force feed Kevin Love, we're gonna get him going. Oh, Kevin Love has 18 points, and then you look up at the end of the game and you're like, oh, he has 20. Like that's and that's
Mobley,
that's sometimes how
he
it
had
feels.
16 in the first half. He finished with 16. Came a little more Derek Favors in the second
in the first
half.
quarter.
10 in the first quarter.
Yeah. So.
But overall, I did think it was a great Mobley game, though. Even though he didn't score in the second half, the offense kind of just moved away from him. Whether that's the offense itself moving away or kind of Mobley taking a little bit of a back seat himself, I thought sometimes. Defensively, though, fantastic. Really, really across the board, they played great defensively, especially when we talk about Niang. That's mainly what I mentioned. He was 1 for 7, but the dude was playing defense. He has really benefited from the way the NBA is allowing more physicality. That's another note on this game. Absurd amount of contact was being allowed at various points. Isaac Okoro got stepped on. Listen, if I had a penny for every time Okoro got stepped on the head and a foul was called on him, I would have 2 pennies, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. It's weird that it happened twice in one season. And even that play itself, that doesn't happen if they just call a foul when Paolo smacks him upside the head. He's going to the rim. Listen, I'm all for the NBA being a little more lenient with contact, but even in the play-in games, it's getting a little out of control, I think.
Yeah, I think as a Cavs fan, I don't think you should be complaining about that just because I think the Cavs really were the aggressors in this game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think not to go back to Allen, but after the game, Allen was like, "I love playoff games because you can be so much more physical. They allow you to do so much more." And I'm like, this is not the guy who we heard last spring where he's like, "Yeah, man, like I'm just getting beat up. I don't know what you want me to do. These lights are pretty bright." So that's where you kind of see the growth. And I think another thing where you see growth with JB is, and kind of talking about Niang some, where like, all right, we're going to put Niang on Paolo, which is kind of a mismatch, if you really think about it, because
You would think so.
Paulo is an all-star. Niang is not an all-star defender. But one of the things that I think was interesting is that they did a good job of like digging down, kind of helping, but not over helping whenever Paulo was trying to drive. So really that allowed Niang to really get up in Paulo's chest and kind of made him settle for those mid-range jumpers. And I think that's where like it feels like if you had JB from last year, he would have been like, all right, we can't let Paolo get to the basket. We're gonna, Jarrett, you're gonna always have to like show help, kind of meet him up above the restricted area, and that's where, it's not like they didn't help at the rim, but they weren't out of position. Like there were no points in the game where I'm like, man, the Cavs are out of position. That stretch where the Magic were getting a couple offensive rebounds when Allen was on the bench, and you kind of felt like, oh yeah, they're getting like bullied a little bit again, but it wasn't because they were just completely out of position, and you're just like, what is this? It's just sometimes the ball bounces the other way and stuff. So that's where I'm just like, that's where I feel like you have to be really optimistic about this team, because it's okay, they learn the lessons, they're applying them, and you can see the difference.
Definitely. I'm more optimistic than I thought I would be after game one. This was like the perfect game one to me. So I'm still going to try and be cautious and not go overboard, because we were pretty optimistic after game two of the Knicks series last year. But I think it's very different because, as you have been saying, they won in all the categories that were their downfall from last year. They won the rebounding battle today, I think 54-40. Let me pull up to double check. Yeah, 54-40. They won the rebounding battle. Jarrett Allen had 18 big rebounds. Big part of that was, again, trusting your defense, not overcommitting, not overhelping when you don't need to. Paolo Banchero had 9 made field goals and 9 turnovers. I thought they did a fantastic job on him. You could really tell that Orlando just doesn't have many perimeter shot creators, something that we talked about in our preview. They shot 8 of 37 from the three-point line today. Now, Cavs didn't shoot that well from downtown either, but the process is just different. The Cavs have guys who are capable of making threes. They just missed tonight. The Magic, it feels like they're similar to last year. Their avenue to winning is they have to make it a dirty roll in the mud game, and they weren't able to do that tonight, at least not overly successful. They had
they got one.
where
They got one, but I think there's a difference between like, all right, this is a grinded out regular season game, this is a grinded out playoff game, because they were 21-2 in games they held their opponent under 100 points in the regular season. Cavs didn't get to 100. They're 0-1, and it wasn't like this was a 15-point game, and I know there was a stretch in the third quarter where they cut it to 5, but it never. I'd say at the beginning of the third quarter, it kind of felt like, all right, like, are the Cavs ever going to score a basket again? This could get ugly. But once they did score a basket again, you're like, oh, yeah, they got this.
They went back in the driver's seat. Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest areas of growth that we saw, too, is because Orlando kept trying to make runs, and the Cavs just kept putting their foot down. That was huge. I had flashbacks to the Atlanta play-in game where we started off red hot from downtown, and just the rest of the game turned into a slog. It felt like that could have happened in the third quarter. That's why you have a Donovan Mitchell. That's why you have even Karis LeVert, who was very bad in his first few minutes. I want to give a lot of credit to JB, because I am someone who has said I don't think he can save himself, no matter what he does in the playoffs. I will say game one, JB was fantastic. The rotations were great. He pulled Karis almost immediately and put Sam out there. I feel like if Karis would have played poorly again in the third quarter, we might have seen Sam get back out there, but Karis just, he led a little bit of I think he had 2 N1s in a row, or am I misremembering? He had 2 great drives to the rim. One of them was an N1 for sure. That was a great left-handed finish, and he helped close out that quarter. And I feel like that's a huge sign of growth from this Cavs team. Really, just again, like we've said a couple times, across the board, their toughness, their physicality in this game. They looked way more feisty. They were scrappy. Okoro picked up an early tech for kind of shoulder checking. Mo Wagner, Niang picks up a tech. And while those might seem like silly things, when you compare it to who they were last year, I think it really does make a difference. I think the energy was just totally brand new from what we saw a year ago.
Yeah, and I think one of the, like, I feel like after the Knicks series, everyone talked about, okay, they need more shooting and they need more scoring off the bench. And you look at today, they had no shooting, 8 for 30. That could have been a game against the Knicks. And they had 14 bench points in total. So it's like, that could have been a game against the Knicks, you know?
Yeah.
So, but they won and they won pretty handedly. I do want to push back, like, or at least pump the brakes a little bit on the JB talk,
Mm.
just because I feel like the team he's going up against is kind of like we know that Jamal Mosley's his best friend. We've gone over, like, I feel like that's been beat into the ground.
Mm.
But they have a very similar style, and I feel like if JB's gonna, you know,
I think he's just
outcoach
doing
somebody.
his job at this point.
Yeah, I think I
Yeah,
think if
that's
JB's
all
going to
it is.
outcoach somebody, it's going to be somebody that he understands how they have to play and understands where those weaknesses are. And I think it's like a really good matchup for him from that standpoint. So like
Yeah.
if they get to the second round, which is still an if they get to the second round and they, they get nixed, then we'll
Yeah,
have a different conversation. But
Listen, I still am not like totally in on JB saving his job by any means. I think he's most likely gone regardless, but I did just want to give credit where it's due because I felt like
it's
he
definitely
had a strong game plan tonight, and I liked his rotation. So sometimes you gotta tip your hat.
yeah, and I mean
But I
I think
appreciate you pumping the brakes there.
I also think how much different this game would have been if they had like Dean Wade
Mhm.
instead of George Niang. I think they could have won by more, or they could have, or
It would have been
maybe,
interesting
yeah. So
because
it's like,
Niang was so crucial to helping them set the tone in a way that I didn't expect. Talking about
yeah,
giving credit where it's due. I'm someone who has said, is Niang even going to be able to play in the playoffs? Man, he was. I did not expect to love him as much as I loved him today. I know
yeah.
he had that huge game against Milwaukee in the regular season. I really feel this was one of his most impactful games, especially we're talking without scoring.
Well, just if they're gonna let you play with your hands as much, play defense with your hands as much as
Yeah.
the rest today were, and like Niang was just kind of in Paolo's shirt the whole time. And
It's
if you
weirdly a good matchup for him because if Paolo's going to try and post him up or get physical with him, Niang's kind of built for that. He's not built for defending in space.
No, no, absolutely not. So that's where it's like it's a good matchup, and it's a really, you have like you have Isaac Okoro in the strong side corner. You have, Jarrett Allen or Evan Mobley on the floor with him. You have guys
Mhm.
who can help. It's not like, he's out there with a bunch of, guys who can't defend. So it
Yeah.
is just a really good matchup for him, but we'll see how that like turns out
Mm.
in a different series, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really
Boston,
encouraging.
if they get farther, this could, even in
Yeah.
this very
This
series, the Niang experience could turn quickly.
Yeah, and this is, but I do want to say that we're singing his praises, and he was, 1 for 7 from the field, and
Yeah.
he was brought here to be a 3-point shooter, so it's like
Mm.
you would think that there's more to this.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think the Magic can do to kind of steal game two, or like what
Yeah.
changes you think that they can make? Do you have
I'm
anything off the
glad you
top of your
asked that
head?
because yeah, I do actually. I was
Oh
gonna flip
wow,
the question to you because I think we might agree on this, but we'll see. Listen, I was so surprised by the way they defended Donovan Mitchell tonight or today, I guess. We talk in the previews a lot. I expected them to trap. I expected them to try and get the ball out of his hands. I'm trying to recall off the top of my head if they trapped him once. I'm sure they
they
did somewhere, but it
they
really didn't feel
trapped.
like.
They didn't really. They trapped Max Strus a couple times, which led to his turnovers,
Hmm.
but they
It
weren't
seemed like they
trapping.
weren't trying to get the ball out of Mitchell's hands. They were honestly focusing more on the rest of the Cavs, which I thought was very interesting
Yeah,
because it's not what we saw in the Knicks series.
I think like if you're going to play against Giannis or a LeBron level player, where it's like, dude, you can't stop LeBron. So what's the point of bringing nine
Yeah.
guys? Like at least don't let J.R. Smith go off. Because
Mhm.
you can't sustain a J.R. Smith game and a LeBron game. But Donovan Mitchell, kind of because he's 6'2", he doesn't have
It's a
that
little
same
easier.
yeah, he doesn't have that
You
same
can
physical
trap him at half
presence.
court, and it's a lot harder for him to get
Well,
any other avenue to the
and that's
ball.
what I don't understand playing Suggs on Darius,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
like you see, like Darius didn't have a great game. I thought Darius was good like he was
He
fine.
had
He was
one of his
definitely
quiet
passable.
good games.
Yeah.
One of his quiet good games where it's like you don't really notice him all that much, but he makes a couple quality plays and he's not really breaking anything.
And you can see how Suggs had an effect on him. Suggs picked him up at 70 feet a couple times. He's really a really physical defender. Really kind of him doing that kind of slowed down the Cavs offense in some situations. But you got to put him on Mitchell. Like, even if you're not trapping, you got to
Yeah.
put your best defender on him, because it's like, let Darius, who's had his worst season since his rookie year and has not found any type of rhythm, let him beat, Gary Harris. It's not like Gary Harris is a slouch that like
Mm.
Darius would go off against, but let him beat Gary Harris, and don't allow Donovan to score 30 points in a way that I don't think was like super. Yeah, I mean, it was hard, but it wasn't like, it wasn't like a
They didn't
magical
make him work for it.
performance. Right.
Yeah. They gave him switches so easily and he just cooked every time. He got to the rim, probably the best we've seen since the knee injury. Had that
Definitely.
huge dunk in the first quarter. I mean, that's the adjustment. If I was Orlando, is we're putting Suggs on Mitchell and we're going to trap a little more. We're going to try and force him to be a passer because
Yeah,
that's the
he
big
didn't have
X
to pass
factor for
today.
Mitchell. He didn't have to.
He only had
And in
3
the Knicks
assists.
series, yeah, and in
Yeah,
the Knicks
he had
series,
to.
that was the make or break factor for Mitchell at least, and he wasn't able to overcome that challenge. I'm interested that the Magic didn't throw that at him. I'd be surprised if they didn't do it in Game 2.
Yeah, and they didn't make Allen and Mobley catch the ball in space and
Exactly.
make them do stuff, because it's like, that's where you want to see, like that's where you want to like, yeah, let's make Mobley beat us with his passing, with his dribbling, with his, 3-point shot. Let's make Allen make those mid-range shots. Let's make him make quick decisions in the short roll. He didn't really have to do that. It felt like a regular season game where it's like, oh, there's a couple times where he had a couple nice passes, but he wasn't against the Knicks. It was like, even when he made a good pass, it was like, cool, I bet you won't do that 2 times in a row. Oh, if you did it 2 times in a
Yeah.
row, you're not going to do it 3 times, and they just
Mhm.
kind of made him do that. And then it's kind of like when they leave Okoro open last season and he misses his first 3, and then when he misses his second 3, but the third time the ball swings to him, he's like, well, I don't really want to miss I don't want to really
Yeah.
miss it again. And when you get the same thing when you have like Allen or Mobley in that situation where it's like, yeah, I'm not going to turn it over, 3 times this quarter. I'm going to just kind of try to reset it and give it to one of the guards, and then you lose like 10 seconds on the shot clock.
You know who had no problem turning the ball over 3 times in the same quarter? Max Strus. Max Strus kind of had a rough game here. I will say I'll get into the rebounding a little bit because he helped a lot in that regard, but it's funny, Max Strus, and I love Max Strus. I'm not saying this to disparage him or anything, but he was the one with like all the playoff experience who we were really hoping would help kind of steer this team a little bit after being rattled last year. And he looked the most rattled out of anyone out there. Everyone else in the Cavs played a really good game. Strus was the only one who really struggled. Now, the turnovers were just weird. That's all. That's the only way I can describe them. They were just like weird, indecisive, kind of out of character. Usually Max is way more reliable than that. But if you have a game where Max Strus shoots 1 for 5 from downtown and turns the ball over 5 times, you could be in trouble. But the Cavs managed to survive that relatively no problem. I'd expect Max Strus to be better throughout the series. And the one thing that I want to really highlight is he had 9 rebounds. That's huge for a team that last year, so much of getting killed on the glass was the fact that it was just Allen and Mobley trying to rebound. Strus chipping in with 9 rebounds in one game alone is so big. He was down there fighting. Even when he didn't get the rebound himself, he would put a body on someone. He would tap at the ball and make it more difficult. During the fourth quarter, when Orlando was trying to make a run, Max Strus secured an offensive rebound that was huge, kind of another backbreaker. The Cavs are way too familiar with that. The Knicks grabbing all those offensive backbreakers.
Right.
So seeing Max Strus do that, kind of almost like Josh Hart a little bit, it was great to see. What did you think of Max Strus in his game tonight?
One thing I do want to give a shout out to Garland and Mitchell for having 3 combined defensive rebounds. That's pretty cool. They definitely learned their lesson from last series. Max Strus was weird. I think you saw how helpful Max Strus is, but then you just saw some really dumb turnovers, in like fast breaks that he didn't need to, like just forcing passes that he didn't need to. I thought them trapping him was a really good idea because
It was
They should be
plus 2.
They should be trapping all the guards, but like it just made sense because when they did trap him, the big wasn't in a position to get the pass, and like Darius is being blanketed by Suggs. What else is going to happen? So that's where I think he was just kind of like a victim of the Magic doing what they were supposed to do, or what they should have been doing the whole time. So we'll see. I don't expect a 1 for 5 from 3 game. I don't expect him to be this careless with the ball, but I thought he was really good. I was interested to see if they would try to go smaller and put Max at the 4. You didn't have to because of how good Niang played, but the 9 rebounds was huge. We talked about, they just had to have somebody who was getting rebounds besides the bigs, and that was Max Strus. Yeah.
It wasn't happening against the Knicks. The rest of the Cavs just weren't getting involved. They weren't getting dirty, and it makes a difference. That's the avenue that Orlando is going to try and go down to win this series and win games. And if the rest of the Cavaliers get involved, it makes it that much more difficult for an Orlando team that struggles to score the ball. I thought the Cavs defense again was just so good all across the board today. What did you think of Okoro's minutes?
I thought Okoro's minutes were good. I don't he was good. I thought he did a good job of being physical and being really like making his presence felt. But I don't think this was like wow, Isaac Okoro played great, or like wow, Isaac Okoro played bad, or you noticed him on the offensive end. So I thought it was a good game, but it wasn't like a great game. So this wasn't the Isaac Okoro game.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. But I think the thing that was reassuring to me is that you didn't notice him on offense because he wasn't just sitting in the corner doing nothing, and he wasn't catching the ball and just kind of basically being a black hole. He actually played a little bit of a role on offense, whereas last year we didn't see that. He had the confidence to push in transition a couple times. They use him as a screen setter a few times here and there, which I honestly really like. I know that there's complications to that, but I think Okoro is just a solid screen setter, one of the better ones on the team. And so when you get him involved, it's just a different way to generate offense. I was glad to see that he could be out there and not be a wart on offense, even when he wasn't. I don't think he even attempted a 3 tonight, did he? No, he didn't.
No.
So only 4 points, 2 rebounds, but Okoro looked like a functional member of the team, and I think if he continues to play like that, it helps them a lot because, again, that defense, they held Orlando to just 83 points, which you do that, you're going to win most of these games.
Yeah, I think I still have my concerns about the Cavs offense. I don't think the Cavs offense was good today. They did generate some decent
stretches.
3-point looks, but this is still a team that can get really stuck on the offensive end, I feel like, and I think there's some levers that the Magic can pull to make it much more difficult for Donovan, because I just thought it was too easy. It felt like a regular season defense against Donovan, which is not what you want if you're the second best defense in the league, and that's kind of the way you're going to win. So there's some things there that I think the Magic can clean up on the defensive end. I'm not sure what they do on the offensive end. They're just not. They don't have the horses, and like you kind of just have to have the dudes sometimes to beat people one-on-one. Like Jalen Suggs was 4 for 16. That's not a good game. I'm sure he's going to rebound when especially when he's back at home. But he's not somebody he's somebody who you say, oh, they went 4 for 16. You're not like, oh wow, that's going to turn around. You're like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. That's sort of who he is. They just don't have guys who can really light it up, and that's that's a problem.
Even Cole Anthony, who's someone on their bench who he has that potential to kind of light it up. He had a very poor game. Not only was he struggling offensively, and I think they played great defense on him, but when he was on the floor, they went at him repeatedly, especially in that first half. Every time down the court, they found a way to get Mobley in the post with them, and it was an automatic bucket. And that's the type of things that you just love to see it.
I need to go back and look at how they got those switches. There's no way they should be giving the switches up as easily as they did.
Yeah,
because
that's really the running theme. I think, for
He
this
was
game.
just
Orlando just did not impose their will on the Cavaliers at all. It felt like they just gave up too many switches.
it felt very passive, and that's where I think that a team that's that athletic and has that much length, if you're trapping, it kind of makes like trapping sort of forces everyone to move. It forces everyone to be really aggressive almost. So I felt like they were just a little too passive at times. So that's where it's like I think the Magic can play a much better defensive game than they did today. But it is just so encouraging that the Cavs didn't get destroyed in a rebounding battle, and they didn't like holding the Magic to 83 points. That's what the Cavs, I feel like they could have done that last year against the Knicks. Like they could have had a game where they held them to 83 points, but instead they held them to 97 points. And you're like, well, they still should have won because of the offense was so bad. And it's like, yes, the offense was bad. The offense sucks. But they didn't need to give up 97 points to the Knicks because they just gave up so many like 14 or 15 self-inflicted points that you could have just, you cut those out, and that's how you get an 83-point game. You know, you don't give up those offensive rebounds. You don't overly help. You don't give up these backdoor cuts. None of those things were happening. And against the Knicks, it was just Obi top and backdoor cut. RJ Barrett wide open in the corner. Just like, come on, man. You know, that's where the team was different. And that's where I think that, yeah, you're not going to win by 15 points every game. I think game 2 is going to be a lot tighter just because of, you know, the adjustments that I think the Magic are going to make, but you just have to be really encouraged.
Definitely. I'm super encouraged. Let's end the episode here by talking about what are we worried about? We talked about some of the adjustments. I think one thing that jumps out to me, if there's any concern, it is the turnovers. They turned it over 17 times today, which didn't really break their back at any point, but it was kind of the catalyst to some of the Orlando runs.
What was that Mobley turnover where he just tried to outlet it to Jarrett Allen right after he just like grabbed the rebound and was like in the air and was like, Jarrett, take this. And that was the worst turnover I think I've ever seen an NBA player have.
Well, I think there might have been a worse one when I don't even know what Donovan Mitchell was trying to do. I think he tried to throw a lob to Allen underhand, and it went straight off the backboard. Almost looked like he was throwing an alley-oop to himself.
I thought he was throwing it to the corner, to the far side corner. So. That's what I thought he was doing.
It looked like he just got his wires crossed with whoever it was. But
yeah, that was
all their turnovers tonight were so just like, what are you doing? And that's not something that you want to do too often against this Magic team, who again struggles to score the ball. You don't want to give them run out opportunities. The same way that you want to take care of the glass, you got to take care of the ball.
One thing I will say is that even though Garland had 5 turnovers, I don't think he had any of like what I would call the Nick turnovers, where like he gets doubled and he just does that little like float over the double to like Mobley, and like the guy like weak side comes in, just picks it off, 3-on-1, easy basket. Like he didn't have any of those, so that's like, you know. That's a pat on the head. Good job.
He had a couple plays that were developing like that, and I was expecting him to try and force that alley-oop, and he just took the floater. And I think he was 2 for 2, maybe even 3 for 3 on floaters tonight. Not very low volume, but it was encouraging to see.
Yeah, that's a shot that he needs to. That's a playoff shot that he needs to have, and he's shown to have it for like stretches. And for some reason, he's really like streaky with it. But when it's going good, you can see there. There was one time I think he got Jonathan Isaac kind of on a switch and did a floater over him, and you're like, that's one of the best defensive bigs in the league, and you're able to get that floater off over him. If you're 6'1", that's how you're going to survive without getting to the rim. So that was really encouraging to see. So I'm very encouraged by what we saw from the Cavs, but you know, let's do it again. Let's do it again.
I agree. Is it still Cavs in 6, or have we been encouraged to bump it up? Still staying with Cavs in 6. Well,
we need to see a second. We need to see a second game. We need to.
Okay.
You know, we don't want to get.
I will hold off.
We don't want to
for the second game as well.
We don't want to get too carried away. There's a lot of, you know, this is super encouraging. So you can't say that, like, you can't come out of this pessimistic, I don't think, but you can say, all right, if the Magic make these changes and the Cavs have a bad shooting night, Darius Garland turns it over 8 times, Donovan Mitchell goes, 7 for 20 from the field instead of
Mhm.
11 for 20, then that's a very different game, and that's a coin flip game. So, we'll wait and see. But if the Cavs take care of business on Monday, then
Be feeling real
then we're
good.
talking. Then we're talking.
Yeah.
Then like the we're so back department we may need to call them up.
We might have to file a claim. But
Yeah.
we will hold off on that because, again, I think those adjustments are going to be the main thing to watch in game 2. Honestly, could be the turning point of the series one way or another because I think Orlando is going to adjust. How the Cavs respond to that, you win game 2, you'll be feeling really good. If the Magic manage to tie it up and you're heading back to Orlando 1-1, we're having a very different episode on Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, if the Cavs win, I think you can be pretty confident about the series.
They take care of business on Monday, and you'll be feeling really good. But again, we'll pump our brakes. We'll stay focused. Really great win. Like I said, you really saw just about everything you would hope to see. The only thing that we didn't see is the 3-pointers rain down. But it's
the Sam Merrill game's coming.
Yeah, the Sam Merrill game is coming. Very excited to see what Orlando throws at the Cavs in game 2 and how the Cavs respond. It's going to be a true test of if things have really changed or if today was just one of those highs that we've seen the highs and lows of the Cavs all season. So we're going to find out what they're really made of in game 2, I think. That's going to do it for this episode of the Junkyard Pod. I want to thank everyone for watching and listening. And with that being said, go Cavs.
I agree. Go Cavs. Brian, can you help Tony out with a light?